And APB, American Protection Bureau, voted #1 best on Long Island for all your security needs. Call 631-390-9050. That's 631-390-9050. APB.
Oh, now I'm feeling uneasy. Get through to you somehow. It's just for a short time. It wasn't my fault. I just couldn't win. The things that I said, they hurt you again. And if you don't, let me down easy. Always on the run, with the backs up against it all. No need to lose your mind, so just let it pass on. It wasn't my fault, I just couldn't win. The things that I said, they hurt you again. And if you don't, let me down easy.
Today on Wrestling Rewind, we are going to be focusing on female professional wrestler Mildred Burke. As you can see here, Mildred Burke is considered to have been one of the strongest female competitors to ever participate in professional wrestling. Before starting her career, she was an office stenographer. Burke began wrestling professionally in the early 1930s. She gained a lot of attention from wrestling and defeated many male wrestlers. Several men tried to pin her and could not. Women who wrestled or tried to wrestle her were even less successful. Burke became the women's world champion soon after she began her wrestling career. It was a title she kept for nearly 2 decades. She was the first women's champion in the United States to hold the title for more than 15 years. Her early years, Mildred Bliss, was born in Coffeyville, Kansas on August 5th, 1915. She was the youngest of 6 children. At the age of 15, she started working with Zuni Indian reservations as a waitress. When she was 17, her boyfriend asked her to marry him. As she agreed, the first wrestling match she ever saw was in Kansas City. This was when she was able to meet Missouri State wrestling champion named Billy Wolf. At the time of seeing her first wrestling match, she was pregnant and had been married for 3 years. Wolf would eventually become her second husband, as well as wrestling coach and manager. And there goes a strong picture of Mildred Burke from the 1930s. Her wrestling career in 1935. When Burke was 19, she started working on the carnival circuit as a wrestler. A reward of $25 was offered to any man of similar weight to wrestle Burke and try to pin her within a 10-minute time period. There was no man who was able to earn the $25. The carnival work didn't pay much, and she got a job working in an office as a stenographer. She asked Billy Wolf to train her. Initially, he didn't want to train Burke. He told her to wrestle a man that he instructed to body slam her. He hoped this would make her leave him alone. The man did, and then Burke came back and body slammed him. Wolf then agreed to train Burke for professional wrestling. And there's Billy Wolf. So Burke wrestled more than 200 men during the 1930s. She won every match except for one of them. Billy Wolf was making a significant amount of money promoting women's wrestling. When he was on the road with the woman and he trained and managed, Wolf developed the reputation as a womanizer. Burke found this behavior unacceptable, and in 1952, the couple divorced. This resulted in Burke being ostracized from many channels of the National Wrestling Alliance. And there she goes right there. The future of women's wrestling was discussed by the NWA Chicago at the Blackstone Hotel in 1953. This meeting Burke was forced to stay in the hotel's lobby. Only the male members of the NWA were permitted to attend this meeting. Burke's ex-husband, Wolf, was able to freely speak to the members of the NWA. After this meeting, the NWA refused to recognize women's wrestling. Women were banned from the annual NWA conferences. This decreased the value of women's wrestling in professional wrestling. And there she goes during a match. Her career achievements. In 1936, Burke won the Midwest Wrestling Association tournament. This gave her the first women's title. She successfully defended the world title in 1937 by defeating female wrestler Clara Mortensen. Burke then traveled around the United States and the world defending her title. In 1948, she wrestled and defeated well-known female wrestler June Byers. She defeated Elvira Snodgrass in 1950 at the Coral Gables Coliseum in southern Miami. During the same year, she defeated Mae Weston. Burke once again wrestled Snodgrass in 1951, where she won the title. She won the match and kept her title. So there goes a nice little poster there. Promoting women's wrestling. During the 1950s, Mildred Burke was in Los Angeles and created the World Women's Wrestling Association. During this time, she was considered to be a woman with a perfect physique, and the Los Angeles Police Department would post pictures of Burke around the police station. The goal was to inspire police officers who were out of shape to start working out in the gym. The NWA eventually started promoting women's wrestling and claimed June Byers was their champion. Burke also maintained her title. She worked with Bill Newman to create the International Women's Wrestlers Incorporated. The organization had offices in Sydney, Australia, New York City, and San Francisco. Burke also promoted women's wrestling on an international basis, where she created the Worldwide Women's Wrestling Association, the WWWA. After retiring, Burke lived in California and operated a women's wrestling school. You can see an old newspaper article there about Mildred. Her injuries. During her wrestling career, Burke experienced many types of injuries. She had 5 knee surgeries as well as a broken nose. Her thumbs had been pushed back to her wrist after being torn from her joints. Once Burke was on her back and an opponent stomped on her face, this caused severe damage to her teeth. After winning one intense match, Burke also suffered temporary blindness. Her signature move was called the alligator clutch. Burke credited this move for her success with wrestling. It is the one move she used to end the majority of her matches. It was a wrestling move that required speed and just the right timing. She would maneuver her opponent to be bent in an odd shape, and then Burke quickly used her weight to pin them down. Career achievements. She was the 3-time women's world champion, the WWWA World Heavyweight Champion, the NWA Women's World Champion. She was a member of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, a member of the WWE Hall of Fame, a member of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. And there goes a picture of her there from the movie Below the Belt, where she was also featured in movies. Mildred Burke was able to play herself into the movie Below the Belt, which was released on November 26, 1981. Robert Ulrich produced a movie called All the Marbles. It was released on October 16, 1981. Burke was able to serve as wrestling advisor on Ulrich's movie. Each of these films was critically acclaimed and focused on professional women's wrestling. There goes The Queen of the Ring, Sex, Muscles, Diamonds, and the Making of an American Legend by Jeff Lean. And this is about Mildred Burke. Looks like a great book, great tights. There were books written about Mildred Burke. The Queen of the Ring, Sex, Muscles, Diamonds, and the Making of American Legend was written by Jeff Lane. It was released on September 1st, 2018. Pro Wrestling, The Fabulous, The Famous, The Feared, and The Forgotten, Mildred Burke was written by Robert Muriel. It was released on December 2nd, 2015. And then there was Mildred Burke, Champion Girl Wrestler, and that was written by Robert Gray Reynolds Jr., and that was released on May 27th, 2015. So good reads on Mildred Burke. Unfortunately, Mildred Burke suffered a stroke on February 14th, 1989. She died on Saturday, February 18th, 1989 at Northridge Hospital. Burke was 73 years old. She's buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Hollywood Hills. So that is about Mildred Burke. Just a short story there that I think is very important as far as wrestling goes and as far as women's wrestling goes. So Mildred Burke, a pioneer and a trailblazer in professional wrestling. I think a lot of women probably should, follow in the footsteps of not only being a female wrestler, but also a promoter and a trainer. And let's just take a look at some of the other women at the time that Mildred Burke was wrestling. We had Donna Cristanello, the Fabulous Moolah came after, Betty Nicolai, Tony Rose, Penny Banner, Sharon Joyce, Marva Scott, Joyce Grable, Barbara Nicholas, Bonnie Watson, Linda Klein, Jessica Rogers, Vivian Vashon, Vicki Williams, Sandy Parker, Kathy O'Day, Lucille Dupree, Kay Noble, and Princess Little Cloud, and Jean Antoine. And let's just get to some pro wrestling rankings and see exactly how women's wrestling progressed after Mildred Burke. And then into the 70s, we had women such as Donna Cristanello, Fabulous Moolah, Betty Nicolai, Tony Rose, Penny Banner, Sharon Joyce, Marva Scott, Joyce Grable, Barbara Nicholas, Bonnie Watson, Linda Klein, Jessica Rogers, Vivian Vashon, Vicki Williams, Sandy Parker, Kathy O'Day, Lucille Dupree, Kay Noble, Princess Little Cloud, Jean Antoine. Let's see. Fabulous Moolah was pretty much the champion everywhere. Vivian Vashon was AWA world champion in most places. And then moving on to the 1972, we had, again, Fabulous Moolah as the champion, and newer girls like Ann Casey and Natasha, Debbie Johnson, and Paula Steele joined the roster in 72. Let's see. Vicki Williams joined the roster, Peggy Patterson, Joyce Becker, Debbie Johnson, and Susan Green. And then in 73, let's see, Lily Thompson joined the ranks. Marie Laverne joined the ranks. Sandy Parker won the WWWA World Champion in Japan. Then Paula Kay joined the ranks. Linda Klein, Dottie Downs, Kay Noble, Vicki Williams, Sue Britton, Ko Aiko, Joyce Grable, Lucille Dupree, and Penny Banner all joined the ranks in 72. Then in 73, let me see, any newcomers in 73? Only Susan Green. Okay, she was already there. 73, 74. Let's see. Marie Levin. Okay, same one. Okay. Jan Sheridan was new in 74. Let's see. We'll just go year by year and see who was new. Lucille Dupree, Mary Jane Mull, Cora Combs, Princess War Cloud. That was in 74. So those were the newer women of 74. And then in 75, we had the debut of Daisy May. Susan Green, Peggy Patterson, 75. Let's see, a few women, not a whole lot. 75 also brought in Barbie Doll and Lisa Raymond. I think that's supposed to be Lisa Raymond, Lily Thomas, and let's see, Ann Casey, Vicki Williams, Daisy May, which we covered her, Leilani Kai making her debut, Bella Starr, and Sheila Shepherd. In 1976, the women, let's see, no newer women, Dottie Downs, 1976. Belle Starr was new in 1976. Kitty Adams was a new girl, and they wrestled, looks like Leilani Kai a lot. Let's see. Vivian St. John was new in 1977. Ann Casey was the United States champion. Vicki Williams, Sue Green, Dottie Downs, Tony Rose, Vivian St. John, Belle Starr, she was new, and Kitty Adams, I guess, had debuted in that year. In 1977, let's see, new girls debuting? Nope. 78. No girls in 78 listed. 79. All right, the women for 79. The only new one, there was Mary Jane Mull, really. We don't see a whole lot of, just going through the list here. Most hated. And then actually by 79, I think they stopped even giving results for the women. So, there were only so many women available to cover. So we're going to get in now to vintage women's wrestling of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So the history in brief with this one is in the 50s, women's wrestling had lots of crowds, but especially Mildred Burke, who we just spoke of, who is very hardworking. She thought of herself as an athlete more than an entertainer, and she wanted to make sure that women she was in the ring with made everything look good too. She insisted on you having to be in the right shape. You have to know what you're doing. You can't just be untrained, a pretty person out in the ring. They insisted that the fans might be interested in the idea of seeing a women's match, but they'll really be won over if the women can actually outperform the men. So that's why what they tried to do. They tried a lot of times to do a lot of moves that were flashier and bigger than the men were doing, more acrobatic moves, because basically they were trying to impress every time they went out, and the guys were just doing another show on the circuit. So they, in the 50s, it was a novelty. In the 60s and so forth, there's a bit of a downslide. The wrestler, trainer, and promoter, Fabulous Moolah, took over, and she would only book women that she trained, and she would charge them a stipend and a booking fee for all of her matches. And a lot of times she would have them move onto her compound in South Carolina and charge them rent. So these women were working for Moolah in the 60s, 70s, and in the early 80s, might have been only bringing home 40 to 50% of what they earned because Moolah was taking everything off the top. But they had no other alternatives. She was the only game in town. Things changed a little bit in the 1980s. If you remember the rock and roll connection with MTV starting out, the first thing MTV really focused on was women's wrestling matches. It was the Fabulous Moolah, who was by this point in her late 50s, against Wendy Richter. And Wendy Richter was managed by Cyndi Lauper, who just had Girls Just Want to Have Fun and a very big name on MTV. So they aired the match and it got huge ratings, and that led to the first WrestleMania. So the very first WrestleMania was started by the Fabulous Moolah and Wendy Richter. That was a definite high point for women's wrestling. Less than a year later, Wendy Richter was not getting paid the royalties she thought she deserved and left the WWF and jumped into Glow. We have a great collection here that we're going to go through for vintage women's wrestling superstars, 1980s and 90s. So let's go on and get right into it. Here goes the Fabulous Moolah, who made her wrestling debut in 1949 and wrestled her last match in 2003. She was synonymous with women's wrestling throughout her career. The first of her 4 official reigns as women's champion began in 1956 and is billed as having lasted 28 years. She actually lost and regained the title numerous times during that span. Moolah won the championship for the final time in 1999 at 76, easily making her the oldest WWE Women's Champion ever. The only reason Moolah isn't at the top of this list is because women's wrestling largely was regarded as a novelty act during her era, much like midget wrestling was. Moolah was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 1995. So let's see. Lillian Ellison was her real name, but Billy Wolf renamed her Fabulous Moolah because she always fought like it was a money match. Moolah started in the 50s and wrestled throughout the early 90s, holding the undisputed professional women's wrestling title longer than any woman in the history of professional wrestling or sports. Her cruelty was her trademark. Known worldwide as the most historic women's wrestler in professional wrestling, the Fabulous Moolah almost single-handedly helped define the women's division as one of the most talented on earth. Moolah got her first big break as a valet for Nature Boy Buddy Rogers in the early 1950s. During this time, she became known as one of the first modern managers of wrestling. In 1955, Moolah began to work for Vince McMahon Sr.'s promotion, Capital Wrestling Corporation. It was at that time she began to catch the attention of wrestling fans nationwide. Her most famous achievements came on September 18, 1956, when she won the Women's World Championship. This was a title that she would retain for 10 years, over 10 years. Once she lost the championship, she regained possession a few weeks later before holding on to it another 8 years, finally relinquishing it in 1976 to Sue Green. During this long reign, she also made history by becoming the first female to wrestle at Madison Square Garden on July 1st, 1972. The Fabulous Moolah would continue to work right in the 1980s, becoming a key figure in the growing rock and wrestling connection, a movement which would help to shape wrestling today. Moolah would go into semi-retirement throughout the duration of the 1990s until she re-signed along with Mae Young to become a cameo figure in the new millennium. It was during this time that she not only became the oldest wrestler on the WWF roster, but she also became the oldest woman to hold the WWF women's title at 76 years old. After this, she would continue to make sporadic appearances until her death on November 2nd, 2007 at the age of 84. In 5 decades, the Fabulous Moolah would work to become the greatest female wrestler in professional wrestling history, a title that cannot be denied. So, the Fabulous Moolah. And then moving on to Medusa Michelle. Better known as Medusa, the name she performed under outside of WWE, Blaze was the centerpiece of the women's division when WWE reactivated its women's title in 1993. Blaze, who employed an athletic, hard-hitting in-ring style, held the WWE Women's Championship 3 times between December 1993 and December 1995. During that time, she had a memorable title program with legendary Japanese star Bull Nakano. In an infamous moment during the Monday Night War, Blaze's finale, she took the title reign in WWE, ended when she showed up on WCW Nitro and dropped the WWE Championship belt into the trash can. Blaze was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2015, even after dumping the title in the trash can. So great for Medusa. And there is another cute shot of Medusa Michelle. Alondra Blaze, or AKA Medusa Miceli, born Deborah Ann Micelli in 1964. She's a former professional wrestler. She's best known under her ring names Medusa, shorthand for Made in the USA, or Alondra Blaze. Her early career was spent in the American Wrestling Association, where she held the AWA World Women's Championship 1 time. In 1988, Micelli was also the first woman to be awarded Pro Wrestling Illustrated's Rookie of the Year. The following year, she signed the contract with All Japan Women's Wrestling, making her the first foreign wrestler to do so. She later joined World Championship Wrestling, where she was a member of the Dangerous Alliance, a group of wrestlers managed by Paulie Dangerously. Blaze was the centerpiece of the women's division when WWE reactivated his title in 1993. Blaze, who employed an athletic, hard-hitting in-ring style, held the women's title 3 times between December 1993 and December 1995. During that time, she had a memorable title program with the legendary star Bull Nakano. In an infamous moment during the WWE Monday Night War, Blaze's final title reign in WWE ended when she showed up on WCW Nitro and dropped the WWE Championship into the trash can. Bliss was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015. Next, we move on to legendary Wendy Richter. Wendy Richter had a strong connection with Cyndi Lauper. Indeed, Girls Just Want to Have Fun was her entrance theme, and Cyndi served as her manager for a long time. Richter was a key figure in WWE's rock and wrestling era in the mid-'80s, when pop star Cyndi Lauper feuded with legendary WWE manager Captain Lou Albano. It culminated with Richter representing Lauper, defeating Fabulous Moolah representing Albano for the WWE Women's title, thus ending Moolah's supposed 28-year title reign. In the match billed as The Brawl to End It All, that was televised live on MTV in 1984, Richter became a 2-time champion when she regained the title from Leilani Kai at the first WrestleMania in 1985. Richter's second and final reign came to unceremonious ending that year when she was legitimately double-crossed and pinned by Moolah in her match that has come to be known as the original Screwjob. Richter left WWE shortly thereafter and did not return until 2010 when she was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Next, we have sensational Sherry Martel. While Sherry managed the likes of Ric Flair, Randy Savage, the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase, and Shawn Michaels, she was also a superb wrestler. In her 1987 WWE debut, Sherry won the WWE Women's title from her mentor, the Fabulous Moolah, and went on to hold the championship for 15 months. In 1989, Sherry was a team captain in the first women's traditional Survivor Series match. So Sherry Martel, one of my favorites, wrestled Sherry Martel and Wendy Richter in my time. So happy to say that, I had that experience. There you see a great shot of Sherry Martel. So Sherry Martel was born in 1958 and unfortunately died in 2007. She was an American professional wrestler and valet, better known by her ring name Sensational Sherry or Sister Sherry. Throughout her career, Martel competed in American Championship Wrestling, the AWA, where she feuded with Medusa, and Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, as Sherry Martel, and the World Wrestling Federation as Sensational Sherry, Sensational Queen Sherry, and Peggy Sue, and in the World Championship Wrestling as Sister Sherry and Sensuous Sherry. While Sherry managed the likes of Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase, and Shawn Michaels, she was a superb wrestler. In her 1987 WWE debut, Sherry won the WWE title from her mentor, the Fabulous Moolah, and went on to hold the championship for 15 months in 1989. She was the captain of the first women's traditional Survivor Series match. So Sherry Martel, always awesome. Then we move on to Lisa Maretti. Was a vet from the 1980s Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling circuit and nearing 40 when she reemerged as WWF's Ivory in 1999. She remained a force through the mid-2000s. Keiko Nakano, as also known as Bull Nakano, the Fierce Nakano, first made her in-ring native Japan before tearing through the WWF competition in the mid-1990s and defeated Alundra Blaze for the WWF Women's Championship. Let's see what's on. I think it was Tina Moretti. I think I said Lisa Moretti, but I think it was Tina Moretti. I could be wrong, but this will tell us. All right. Tina Moretti. There you go. And let's see this beautiful picture of Tina Moretti. Lisa Tina Moretti, born in 1961, is an American professional wrestler. Began her career in Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling promotion, where she wrestled as Tina Ferrari from the mid to late 1980s. She then debuted in the World Wrestling Federation in 1999 as a manager for the team of Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. She won the WWE Women's Championship twice before becoming a part of the Right to Censor group, an alliance of wrestlers with conservative views, and winning the title for a third time. Moretti was a vet of the 1980s Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling circuit and nearing 40 when she reemerged as WWF's Ivory in 1999. She remained a force throughout the mid-2000s, wrestling Bull Nakano. The Fierce Nakano first made her name in her native Japan before tearing through WWF in the mid-1990s, defeating Alundra Blaze for the WWF Women's title. So Tina Moretti. And then we move on to Bertha Faye. She took Alundra Blaze's WWF title at 1995 SummerSlam. Let's see. They're trying to make us guess who it is, but we know Bertha Faye. And Bertha Faye, also known as Monster Ripper. Oh, she was young and small back then. Rhonda Singh, a classic woman wrestler from Canada and trained by Mildred Burke and debuted in the late 1979. Her Elise's Beef, Bertha Faye, La Monster, Monster Ripper, La Monstra, and Rhonda Singh were all her ring names. She was managed by Harvey Whippleman. She was in the stable she worked with were many. Nitro Girls with AC Jazz, Baby, Shay, Chameleon, Chiquita, Fire, Gold, Kimberly, Naut, A, Silver, Sky, Spice, Star, Storm, Siren, Teo. Did she work? She worked as Beef. She was a Nitro Girl. Okay. Her trademark moves were Avalanche Body Slam, Butt Drop, Gorilla Press, and Powerbomb. Finishing moves were the Big Splash and the Sit-Down Powerbomb, the Big Bertha Bomb. Oh, Big Bertha. After training with Mildred Burke, she wrestled in Japan under the name Monster Ripper. In 1987, she returned to Canada and began working with Stampede Wrestling, where she worked her first match at Stampede Women's Champion. In 1995, she worked with the World Wrestling Federation as the comedic character Bertha Faye, winning the WWF Women's Championship. She also wrestled in World Championship Wrestling to help generate interest in their women's division. In 1995, Singh was contracted by WWF to help their fledgling women's division. She, however, was repackaged as Bertha Faye, a comedic character who lived in a trailer park and dated Harvey Whippleman. WWF management originally wanted her to have an on-screen feud with Bull Nakano, but there was a change of plans after Nakano was charged with cocaine possession. Singh made her WWF debut on the April 3rd, 1995 episode of Monday Night Raw, participating in a sneak attack on Alundra Blaze, making it appear as if Blaze's nose had been broken at SummerSlam. Faye defeated Blaze for the WWF Women's Championship and held the title until October 23rd, 1995, airing of Monday Night Raw, where Alundra Blaze regained the title. Fan interest in women's wrestling sunk once again as the year closed, and Singh tired of working there. Moreover, Faye was frustrated with her gimmick, and WWF management asked her to not perform the same power moves as the male wrestlers. So instead, Faye was forced to act as comic relief. After a year with the company, Singh asked for a release from her contract. She briefly returned to Japan, but did not like the new system, which did not guarantee payouts. In the late 1999 and early 2000s, she worked with World Championship Wrestling briefly and appeared on several telecasts to help generate interest in women's wrestling division. And she was also a contender for both the WCW Cruiserweight Championship and the WCW Hardcore Championship. In addition to competing in matches using her Sting and Monster Ripper gimmicks, she also made a couple of appearances with the Nitro Girl dance troupe as Nitro Girl Beef as a comedic relief. So let's see. Yeah, this is okay. Their title history was pretty long. She had the WWA Japan World Singles title, defeating Jackie Sato in 1979. WWA title in 1980. The Stampede Women's title, defeating Wendy Richter in 87. The WWC World Wrestling Council, defeating Wendy Richter in Puerto Rico in 1987, and again in 1990, defeating Candy Devine for the WWC title. WWC title again in 1990, defeating Sasha. WWC title she held again in 1991, and again in 1991, defeating Candy Devine. WWA defeating Lola Gonzalez in 1991. And the WWF Women's title, defeating Alundra Blaze in 1995. So let's see, her career highlights. As a teenager, she contacted the Hart brothers about training her, but they rejected her. Rhonda Singh stumbled upon Japanese women's wrestling on television while in Hawaii and was hooked. She got her hands on wrestling magazines, where she found and contacted Mildred Burke, who trained her at the wrestling facility in Encino, California. She trained for several weeks before getting recruited by All Japan Pro Wrestling as Monster Ripper. She was given the name Monster Ripper, which she used until 1995 when she joined WWF in 1979. Her and Komini debuted in Japan and defeated the beauty pair Jackie Sato and Maki Udo. Let's see, she was the WWA Women's World Champion, defeated Jackie Sato in 1979. And wow, there is a lot. She worked for Stu Hart in Stampede. She traveled to Mexico and Japan. She was, wow. She Monster Ripper was all over the place. This Bertha Faye, you know her as WWF's Bertha Faye, but she was so much more than that before then. Let's see, in May 10th, 2000, let's see, Rhonda Singh defeated Elizabeth by disqualification. Miss Elizabeth. So that was her retirement match. And then she passed away at the age of 40. I would figure she would have been a lot older than that, but I guess not. Then we move on to Susan Sexton, who was born in Perth, Australia. She was trained by Ali Musa the Turk Sexton went to the United States in 1975 and began working for Mildred Burke. After briefly working for Burke, she began working independent cards around the world. In 1989, she worked for American Wrestling Association. Susan Sexton was the reigning LPWA Women's Champion. Recognized by WCW as world champion, Sue Sexton has relocated to Los Angeles, where she helps train new wrestlers and also has a writing career. Very interesting for Sue Sexton. Then we have one of my favorites, Luna Vashon. She was a playable character in the video game WWF Raw, the first woman American wrestler to be immortalized. Vashon knocked around for years before muscling into WWF and WCW in the 90s. Once she arrived, she mentored and rivaled Sable and did battle with Medusa Michelle, which was a great set of matches. I'm going to learn a little bit more about Luna Vashon. There she goes. It doesn't have much more about her. I don't know why. And then we move on to Debbie Combs. These are all women that I've wrestled, so I love reading about them. But let's see. We will go to Debbie Combs' profile and see all about her. Oh boy, the last match I had with her, it was the NWA title match for IWA Mid-South. And I got my hair stuck in a ring apron and pulled my hair out, but that's a whole other story. So Debbie Combs, there's a great shot of her there. And Debbie Combs is a professional wrestler better known as Debbie Combs. Worked in National Wrestling Alliance and is a former NWA Women's Heavyweight Champion. She originally won the title by battling in Honolulu, Hawaii in the spring of 1986. At some point, she was no longer recognized as the champion and defeated Penny Marshall to become the champion again in Kansas City, Missouri in 1987. The Kansas City promotion withdrew from the NWA in 1987 and closed in 1988. The NWA vacant Combs title and awarded Misty Blue Sims as the title. The NWA United States Women's Championship, a replacement of the prior NWA World Women's Championship held by Combs. That's confusing. Combs challenged Sims to a match at Delta Tiger Lily's card in 1989, but Sims was unable to accept due to an arm injury she had sustained. Sounded like somebody just might not wanted to lose their title. Okay, and then we have Leilani Kai. She battled Alundra Blaze for the WWF Women's title at WrestleMania 10. Seymour, another of Moolah's girls, was an old school pounder on one-time WWF Women's champ who endured. She was the only wrestler, man or woman, to appear on the first WrestleMania bill at End the 10th. She trained hundreds or women like Riptide, Bobcat, Molly McShane, Brandy Wine, Sweet Destiny, just to name a few. Okay. And then we have Heidi Lee Morgan. Morgan began her career at the age of 10. She was named Daisy May at the time. She was a valet for her father, Les Morgan, and she was trained by the fabulous Moolah, Wolfgang von Heller, and Johnny Rods. She battled Wendy Richter for the NWF Women's title in the first ever women's steel cage match in 1987. Morgan later held the LPWA Tag Team Championship with Missy Blue Sims and the WWA Ladies Championship during her career. Heidi Lee Morgan, who we'll have on the show for an interview soon, has a long history in professional wrestling. And could you imagine starting at the age of 10 years old? I didn't start much later than that, but Heidi definitely had a jump on me. So there's a great shot of Heidi there. See, Heidi Lee Morgan began her career again at the age of 10 under Daisy May. And let's see, she is amazing. There's nothing more we need to say about Heidi. Then we got Reggie Bennett. She began wrestling on the California Independent Circuit in 1986, primarily for Independent Wrestling Federation, where she won the promotion's women's championship 3 times. Soon after that, she was signed to Ladies Professional Wrestling Association, and Bennett signed with All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling in 1994 and competed there for several years and was a fan favorite. So let's see a little information about Reggie Bennett. She was huge and muscular and probably one of the strongest female wrestlers out there. And this was Reggie when she was very young. Very impressive. 5'8", 160 pounds. Reggie Bennett began wrestling on the California Independent Circuit in 1986, and she was signed to LPWA and All Japan Women's Wrestling in 1984. Bennett faced Chigusa Nagayo at Big Egg Dome Wrestling Universe show at the Tokyo Dome on November 20th, 1994. She won the IWA Women's World Title Championship in 1995, defeating Manami Toyota, and she lost the IWA title later in 1995 to Takako Inanu. Bennett then went on to capture the All Pacific Championship by defeating Mariko Yoshida and then Koro Ito in a tournament on June 22nd, 1996. Although she would again lose her title to Iono, Reggie Bennett retired from professional wrestling in 2004. But she had a long and strong career. So Reggie Bennett, huge lady, trained, I believe, by the Malaikos over in Tampa, Florida. So check out Reggie Bennett, more of Reggie Bennett if you need. And here goes a great shot of our next female, Rockin' Robin. Rockin' Robin, Robin Smith, born in 1964, better known by her ring name Rockin' Robin, is a retired professional wrestler. As the daughter of Arlene Grizzly Smith, she's the second-generation wrestler. Her brother, Sam Houston, and half-brother, Jake the Snake Roberts, are also wrestlers. Smith worked for the World Wrestling Federation in the 1980s, and she held the WWF Women's Championship from October 1988 until it was retired in 1990. She then worked on the independent circuit. So, Rockin' Robin, another legend. And next we move on to the early Paris Hilton of professional wrestling. I guess what you would refer to her as the the queen of the UWF, Missy Hyatt. Great shot of Missy Hyatt there. And Missy Hyatt is an American professional wrestling valet, better known as her ring name, Missy Hyatt. She gained the majority of her fame working with World Championship Wrestling before joining Extreme Championship Wrestling, World Class Championship Wrestling, and Universal Wrestling Federation. Hyatt's professional wrestling career began in 1985 when she was hired by World Class Championship Wrestling, WCCW. She was the manager of John Tatum, who she was dating at the time. She was embroiled in a feud with another valet in WCCW, Sunshine. This rivalry culminated in a mud pit match at the Texas Stadium in 1986, one of my favorites. Eventually, Hyatt and Tatum left for the Universal Wrestling Federation. At this time, Eddie Gilbert was the leader of Hot Stuff International, a group that included Sting and Rick Steiner. Hyatt formed an alliance with his group, and it was renamed H&H International, Inc. It was long before Hyatt and Gilbert started an affair that caused problems with Tatum. Hyatt left Tatum for Gilbert in 1987, and they split up on screen as well. She married Eddie Gilbert in 1988. While still under WWF contract, Hyatt worked the contract about working the WWF Vince McMahon wanted Hyatt to replace Rowdy Roddy Piper and his segment Piper's Pit with a new segment called Missy's Manor. Missy's Manor segments were taped on March 21st and 2nd and April 23rd, 1987. Despite having big-name stars on her segments, such as Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Miss Elizabeth, the Honky Tonk Man, and Harley Race, the show was considered a disappointment, and McMahon had asked Hyatt to become a featurette, which were the ring girls shown at pay-per-views. She thought this role was beneath her, and she went back to the UWF. She was right. In 1987, when the UWF was purchased by the National Wrestling Alliance, Jim Crockett Promotions, Missy and Eddie came along. Missy was used as a commentator, conducting her debut interviews with Sir Oliver Humperdinck on December 1988 edition of World Championship Wrestling on TBS, and then eventually as a manager for Eddie Gilbert and the Steiner brothers. She eventually returned to her role as commentator and host of WCW Main Event, and soon was engaged in a feud with fellow commentator Paulie Dangerously. The feud led to various competitions between the two, including an arm wrestling match at the Clash of the Champions, Dixie Dynamite on January 1991, in which Hyatt defeated Dangerously. A contributing factor to her victory might have been that Hyatt removed her jacket to reveal her low-cut top as the refs stared at the contest. Missy would engage in her battle over who was the first lady of wrestling, was with the Dangerous Alliance Medusa, with Hyatt narrowly winning a bikini showdown in 1992 Beach Blast at the pay-per-view event, while in WCW, Hyatt made an appearance in IWA at ringside during a match between the Bushwhackers and the Thunderfoots. Hyatt returned to managing in 1993 with the association with the Nasty Boys. She briefly managed the Barbarian during a match. Hyatt jumped off the ring apron and her breast popped out of her top. When she went to the WCW office the next day, they allegedly had blown up the picture of her and put it on a wall. Hyatt complained to her boss at the time, Eric Bischoff, who did not take action, so Hyatt went over his head to the boss, and as a result, Bischoff released her. She then decided to file a lawsuit against WCW for sexual harassment and for overdue payments for her time doing a 1-900 hotline for the company. Bischoff, however, claimed that the Hyatt was fired on February 8th for her behavior and jealousy over signing Sherry Martel. Okay. I mean, what a ridiculous story. Like she was jealous over signing a Sherry Martel. That's absurd. But we'll get to the next lady coming here is Misty Blue Sims. So a shot of Misty there. And Misty Blue Sims was the champion of the red, white, and blue and the ultimate good girl who battled forces of anti-American evil. Sims got into wrestling after learning to box and be a part of all-female boxing show. From there, she was invited to Killer Kowalski's wrestling school, where she trained for 18 months prior to her first match. Sims competed for the American Wrestling Association in a 10-woman battle royal at Wrestle Rock 86, and on April of 86, the match was won by Sherry Martel. In 1986, Sims joined the National Wrestling Alliance and was awarded the NWA United States Women's Championship, a replacement to the prior NWA Women's World Championship held by Debbie Combs. She once challenged Debbie Combs to the unified title match for the NWA Women's title match and the NWA United States Women's title match, but was attacked by Combs' manager, mother manager Cora Combs. She frequently defended the NWA US title against Linda Dallas, Cat LaRue, Black Venus, Mad Dog Debbie Irons, and a handful of other women on the NWA's TV programs Worldwide Wrestling and World Championship Wrestling. Many of the matches between Dallas and Sims ended with the two battling each other with Dallas's kendo stick. She also frequently partnered with Heidi Lee Morgan and Vola in tag team matches. She was also briefly feuded with Jim Cornette during a televised interview on TBS. Sims requested that Cornette help train her to lure him into the ring and nailed him with a dropkick. When the Midnight Express hit the ring, Dusty Rhodes appeared to even the sides. Sim then competed in an 8-person mixed tag team match, partnering with Rhodes, Nikita Koloff, and Barry Windham against Jim Cornette, the Midnight Express, and Dick Murdoch. However, the angle never reached the popularity of Cornette's similar feud with Baby Doll. While Medusa Michelle was reigning AWA World Women's Heavyweight Champion at the time, Sims challenged her to a unified title match with the NWA United States Women's title and the AWA Women's World title at a Delta Liger Lilies event, but the match never happened. When the NWA phased out the women's division in late 1989, Sims wrestled on an independent circuit and eventually joined Ladies Professional Wrestling Association. She and Heidi Lee Morgan competed as a Team America and won the LPWA tag team titles. They lost the titles to the Glamour Girls. Misty feuded with Monster Ripper in Puerto Rico and won a title from her. There are unverified reports that Missy may have lost some matches, but no visual or readily available proof was written that seems to exist. In late 1991, Sims wrestled in World Championship Wrestling, which had evolved from the Jim Crockett Promotions branch of the NWA, where she competed in matches against Linda Dallas and Kat LaRue. So there goes for Misty Blue Sims. I saw her wrestle Heidi Lee Morgan at an NWA show at the Civic Center in Philadelphia. It was actually one of the first live female wrestling matches that I had seen. Next, we have Miss Elizabeth. And she was American Professional Wrestling Manager, occasional professional wrestler, and a professional wrestling TV announcer. She gained international fame from 1985 to 1992 in the World Wrestling Federation and now WWE. Well, not now. And from 1996 to 2000 in the World Championship Wrestling. In her roles as manager to Macho Man Randy Savage, as well as others during that period. I believe she also managed the Four Horsemen in later times. And accompanying her was Nancy Benoit and Deborah McMichael, or I believe, Ric Flair and all those people she managed in WCW. So Miss Elizabeth, a little bit longer of a career than what I just read. Moving on to the next legends of ladies wrestling. It's going kind of slow. But I was never really a Miss Elizabeth sort of person, more of a Sunshine, Missy Hyatt, Dark Journey, which Dark Journey is not in this list, I don't think, and that's kind of disappointing. Next, we move on to Bambi, who was born as Selena Majors, better known by her stage name Bambi, American professional wrestler, debuted in 1986 working for David McLean. She competed in his nationally televised Professional Women's Wrestling League, Powerful Women of Wrestling, or POW, as Bambi. In 1987 and 1988, Bambi feuded with the AWA Women's World Champion Medusa Michelle. She also competed in a lingerie battle royal at the AWA Super Clash 3 pay-per-view in December 1988. Bambi's arch rival was the aforementioned Medusa Michelle. Bambi lasted in wrestling biz longer than most of the ladies. She was still fighting in WOW in 2001. Wow. Wow. So, and then we have a list of other ladies here. Kat LaRue being one of them, who we had mentioned earlier as a regular opponent of Misty Blue Sims. And all this information taking a long time to come up. There goes Kat LaRue with the big strap. She was a professional wrestler built from New Orleans, Louisiana, and was one half of the Nasty Girls tag team with Linda Dallas. Kat LaRue made her debut in 1985 as a 16-year-old after training with Killer Kowalski at his school in Massachusetts. Kat began her career as Misty Blue Sims' tag team partner before turning against each other, joining former enemy Linda Dallas and Mad Dog Debbie's stable. The trio wrestled for many Northeastern independents, including IWF, ICW, USWF, NCW, and others. They got their big break when, alongside Misty Blue Sims, Heidi Lee Morgan, and Cookie Zula, they joined Jim Crockett Promotions and stayed there from 1987 until mid-1988. Upon leaving Jim Crockett Promotions, they returned to North Indy wrestling scene in 1989. Kat wrestled for Delta Tiger Lilies, Florida Championship Wrestling, and Joel Goodhart's TWA before joining Tor Berg's LPWA, teaming with Linda Dallas and as the Nasty Girls. The company went into hiatus in 1991, and the Nasty Girls returned to the East Indie scene. Kat retired in the end of 1995. So, and then we're moving on to Linda Dallas. And there's a shot of the young Linda Dallas, wearing blue for a change. After training with Killer Kowalski, Linda began wrestling in the Northeastern New England independent wrestling scene. In 1985, she won the IWF women's title, defeating Lady Liberty, and lost the title to Misty Blue Sims after the two feuded for the title in World Class Wrestling Association, International Championship Wrestling, and Continental Wrestling Association. And the independent scene, Linda's big break came with Jim Crockett Promotion, and she became a fixture on NWA television and live events as a part of a faction led by her sister, Mad Dog Debbie Irons. The run, it concluded in 1988, and Linda and the company returned to the independents. Next stop was Delta Tiger Lilies in Vegas, Nevada, which was a precursor to the LPWA. The Nasty Girls with Kat Larue joined the newly formed LPWA and became contenders for the LPWA World Tag Team titles. They lost in the tournament semifinals, but were strong contenders for the titles for the stay in the company. They did win the titles on one occasion, but the belts were returned when Wally Carbo overturned the decision. The Nasty Girls left the LPWA at the end of 1991 and returned to the Northeast Independents until both Kat Larue and Linda both retired in 1995. After retiring from wrestling, she moved to South Carolina, where she resides with her husband, Ralph, and works in the fashion business. Interesting. We're trying to get to Mad Dog Debbie here to see what her deal was. But I think last time I checked this out, Misty Blue Sims kept coming up as Mad Dog Debbie. Yeah, and she still does. I'm not really sure why. But all right. And then we got this Hollywood, and then Vine, as we all remember from the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, run by Jackie Stallone back in the 80s. Let's see if we got anything on Vine here. Nope, no image of Vine. Get to Sue Green. Should be an image of Sue Green. These ladies, legends in professional wrestling, coming after Mildred Burke in the pioneer golden era of professional wrestling. Now, these are the ladies that come a little later. There's Sue Green, women's wrestler. She's a Texas gal, one big Texas gal that could beat the devil out of every woman and man equally. She was the kind of woman you didn't want to get mad at you unless you were eager to go to the hospital. She worked mostly in the 70s, so much of her work you didn't see on TV, and back then matches happened everywhere and weren't filmed, so videotape was very uncommon. Sue was one big old Texas girl that could beat the devil out of any man and woman equally. She was the kind of woman you didn't want to get mad at you unless you wanted to go to the hospital. She worked mostly in the 70s, so much of her work, the Tex Sue Green, very tall and lanky, but could fight. She was excellent in Texas and had excellent feuds with the Fabulous Moolah. Unfortunately, her career was affected by injuries and was out for a few years. She was the PGWA champion twice. The WWE Women's Champion. Unfortunately, not recognized by WWE. In 1976, she won the title. Let's see, Sue Green defeated the WWE Women's Champion, Fabulous Moolah, in 1976. They do not recognize it. She was hospitalized in Columbia, South Carolina, and she was battling a staph infection or something. Anyway, her signature move was the Bulldog and the Boston Crab. So she was replacing Penny Banner in 2008 as well. Let's see. Then we move on to Peggy Lee Leather, who is a great big gal, great big, strong, interesting gal. Although this was her at her start, wasn't that big back then, but moved on to a great big gal. Let's see. Peggy Lee, also known as her stage name, Peggy Lee Leather, Lady X and Thug, is an American professional wrestler. She competed in Florida Championship Wrestling as Peggy Lee Pringle, the sister of Percy Pringle. She engaged in a feud with Mad Maxine, who had been battling Percy. She then began working for American Wrestling Association as Peggy Lee Leather and challenged Medusa Michelle for the AWA Women's World Heavyweight Championship. She also competed in a lingerie battle royal at AWA Super Clash pay-per-view event in 1988. I just got to laugh at that because why would they put her in a lingerie battle royal? I would love to turn back and see that one, though, to be honest with you. Moving on, our next lady of the evening, who's taking so long to come up, is Cheryl Lightning Russa. So 5'1", 110 pounds. Cheryl Lightning Russa is a very small package of dynamite, trained by legendary Jean LaBelle and ex-world champion Sue Sexton. Cheryl is a former Glow Girl and LPWA wrestler. She teamed up with Reggie Bennett, known as Little Mo, forming a tag team Locomotion, and has performed worldwide. Cheryl also partnered with Cindy Paradise together in a tag team, the Mighty Mites. She is also accomplished and a hardworking stunt woman. Steel Kittens has her as all right. They got some videos of her. And then moving on to the next lady, the California Doll. Gotta love any dolls in wrestling, right? Doll. Oh, no image of the California Doll, but I think we all remember from Glow who she was. So no picture necessary, just visualize it. And the next lady we got coming up, unfortunately, she just passed away last week, Miss Candy Devine, who I also had the pleasure of wrestling several times. Born Candice Rummel, Candy Devine began her wrestling career by running a fan club for Lanny Poffo and working briefly as a ring card girl for ICW in Kentucky. Devine is best known for her time spent in American Wrestling Association, feuding with Sherry Martel. She held the AWA Women's Championship on 4 separate occasions, and she won a battle royal to fill a vacant title in 1984. Devine competed at AWA's Super Clash and wrestled Rock in 1986 and Battle by the Bay and War in Windy City cards. Now, Candy competed in one of the first female thumbtack death matches with me in Cleveland, Ohio, for Cleveland All Pro Wrestling. So Candy, legendary, pioneer, and groundbreaker. Rest in peace, Candy. Next, we move on to a legendary lady who was also one of my favorites back in the day of watching NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions. Come on, load baby doll. That's who we're waiting for. So, and as soon as I see her say her name, there she goes. Come on, baby doll. Nicola Roberts was the daughter of Nick Roberts and successful women wrestler Lorraine Johnson. Her father, Nick Roberts, was a small-time wrestling promoter in Lubbock, Texas. She's best known for her appearances in World Class Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions in the 1980s. I'm surprised they didn't mention her affiliation with Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard and the original Four Horsemen, and the fact that she became a championship wrestler in her later years. But I guess they can't fit everything in, right? But Baby Doll, absolutely one of the groundbreaking women in professional wrestling, one of the greatest promo cutters ever, between her and Sunshine. Just great stuff. And here goes Matilda the Hun. Excuse me, also known as Queen Kong. So Dee, better known as Queenie, first used the stage name Queen Kong while skating for 5 years with such roller derby teams as the Chicago Hawks, the New York Bombers, and the Detroit Devils, and the Texas Outlaws. Her acting career has been argumented by a short live stint as a rock star. The video to her hit single "I Eat Raw Meat" was played often by Los Angeles sportscaster Fred Rogan for a number of years on KNBC TV4. She has appeared on a numerous amount of game shows, Win, Lose, or Draw, and The Gong Show, where she was a co-host for 14 episodes. She also made a living delivering very physical singing telegrams known as slamograms, where she would take down a victim, a guest of honor at a party in various professional wrestling moves, all designed to look extremely painful and brutal, but ultimately harmless. Due to various injuries over the years from wrestling and roller derby, she no longer performs slamograms due to health reasons. She also did those private wrestling sessions as well. Some of her greatest fans have been children. During her glow years, she made personal appearances to mobs of kids. Despite her rough and gruff image, she is in real life the sweetest, most gracious person, treating her friends and fans with immense kindness and affection. Matilda the Hun, a moniker, was given to her by Glow producers. It wasn't until the show was over for a number of years that she discovered that they had taken the name directly from a character played by Roberta Collins in 1957 Death Race 2000. Queenie was one in a million and an inspiration and a wonderful friend. Okay, Peggy Lee, definitely a legend, I would say. And next, we're moving on to Tina Ferrari, also known as Tina Maretti. Look at that beautiful picture. Beautiful picture, Tina Maretti. So Tina Maretti, Lisa Tina Maretti, was born in 1961, and she began her wrestling career in the Gorgeous Ladies of Professional Wrestling promotion, where she wrestled as Tina Ferrari from the mid to late 1980s, and then she debuted for WWF in 1999 as a manager for Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. She won the WWE Women's Championship twice before becoming a part of Right to Censor, an alliance of wrestlers with conservative views, and winning the title for a third time. Maretti was a vet of the 1980s Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling circuit, and near 40 when she reemerged as WWF's Ivory in 1999. She remains a force through the mid-2000s of wrestling Bull Nakano. And Tina Maretti. I hope you've enjoyed this little education lesson on women's wrestling from the golden era, the pioneer era, and beyond, and see exactly what female wrestlers were, the encouragement and the outlook for the future of women's wrestling. So hopefully when you look at the women now, you could see a little bit of the past inside of them. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and I hope that you will come back every Sunday night on YouTube, on the Monte and the Pharaohs YouTube here. We have a good network going on. So please join me back for Wrestling Archives, Wrestling Roundtable, and Wrestling Rewind every Sunday at 7. Hope you've enjoyed the show. And as always, have a great night and a great life. Good night.